Because of budget constraints, Formula One teams have had to cut back on developing specialized parts that may only be used at one circuit. That was evident at Monaco, where teams had not added any extra aero items aside from some brake duct modifications. Most only changed the steering geometry, which is traditionally required to help cars navigate the hairpin. While the lack of aero tweaks was partly due to this year's more stringent bodywork regulations, it was also due to the budget cap, with teams preferring to spend their limited funds on developments that benefit a wider range of circuits. Red Bull chief engineer Paul Monaghan said, "I may not be thanked by the governing body, but it's very much regulation. We are quite restricted on what we can do, and the absence of modularity makes it very expensive to do the little things we used to do with all the winglets, gurneys on the front wing, this type of thing. It's not practical, it's not rewarding, and because of the regulations tying us down on the precise geometries, it's very expensive. I wouldn't be so quick to play down the extra steering lock. It is far from a trivial undertaking. We have to put the wishbone pickups inside the wheel by regulation, so you can't just do a longer steering arm. You can't do this type of thing to try and get the lock. We have to seal the holes around the wishbones where they enter the wheel, not play around where we are not supposed to apparently. So it's a fairly big undertaking to realize the lock that was always designed in." Regarding Red Bull and others bringing revised brake ducts to Monaco, Monaghan conceded that they could also be useful elsewhere later in the season. Again, it's quite a big and expensive undertaking. I suppose if you look towards Hungary, look towards Singapore, that's knowledge, and possibly parts that we will take forward to those particular races. Where else might we possibly need the high brake cooling? We could probably cope with Spielberg, Baku, with one slightly different arrangement. So probably Hungary and Singapore. They're typically where you really push your luck, and Singapore especially. Jody Eggington, AlphaTauri's technical director, agreed that the budget cap had an impact on the lack of novelties in Monaco, while admitting that there have been fewer track-specific updates in recent years. "I think it's a number of factors really. A lot of people, including ourselves, bought a high downforce wing to Barcelona, and that is our high downforce package. That's where we are. So there was nothing else for the moment. We might have another look again for Hungary. And then the steering. It's a given. You've got to do it. And probably some odds and ends on brake ducts associated with that. You can see on one hand, it's got something to do with the budget cap, but then equally, I'm just thinking back on the last 3-4 years. I don't remember us being really focused on anything massive for Monaco. Not like back in the day when we'd have all sorts of things mounted on the car. Probably for us it was, that's our package, that's what it is. We think that's a competitive package for this event, so we didn't feel the need to go further, and anything new is Monaco specific. Maybe it makes it onto the car in Hungary, and maybe it makes it onto the car in Singapore, but it's a long way. Meanwhile, Aston Martin boss Mike Crack made the intriguing observation that teams will have to think carefully about developing a special low drag package for the Italian GP. We have constant cost monitoring, like we have aerodynamic monitoring, or any kind of monitoring that you have, so we have a very good overview, week by week, where we are, in terms of what we are spending and what the cost will be. And before we decide a new, say for example, a Monza package or Monza wing, we know that this is costing us, and we know how much money we will have if we make it. We have obviously some margin in for crashes and stuff like that. I mean, if we repeat the Melbourne thing every weekend, then we will not do the Monza package. However, team principals are urging the FIA to discuss the impact of a significant increase in inflation and living costs in the cost cap era. The budget cap limit has already been reduced by $5 million to $140 million, forcing F1's top teams to cut back on spending this year. However, their finances are under additional strain as a result of a dramatic increase in inflation and spending caused by the ongoing fallout from the coronavirus pandemic and the Ukraine war. This means that not only will transportation and electricity costs skyrocket, but there will also be pressure to raise employee wages to keep them in line with true living expenses. When F1's cost cap was established, the global economy was in a much better shape, and inflation was nowhere near where it is now, which is why there is little wiggle room in the regulations to help teams cope with the difficulties they are facing. And Red Bull team boss Christian Horner believes the situation requires immediate attention. "I think it's a very real problem, because we're already seeing extremely high inflation. We have to remember that when the budget cap was set, back in the midst of the pandemic, in the middle of 2020, nobody could have foreseen the circumstances that we would have in the world today. Of course, what we see going on in the world is only going to drive prices one way, and inflation looks like it could hit record amounts. We're seeing that impact already on things like air freight. I think it's a very serious problem that we have to look at and address, because this has a one-to-one impact on people's jobs and livelihoods. While there is yet to be a universal agreement among teams on how to respond to the problem, Horner believes it is the FIA's role to step in and assist. I think it's the duty of the regulator to look at this. There's a degree of urgency to make sure that the relief is put in place to take into account what's going on in the world, with the cost of living increases changes that we're all going to see. Williams boss Jost Capito stated that teams were already facing a cost squeeze, with travel costs having risen dramatically due to the rise in oil prices. When you see the logistic costs go up 40 to 50%, this is a major impact. If you have to put millions more in logistics, that means you have to reduce spending elsewhere. You have your development laid out over the year, so then if things come in that are completely out of the control, it makes the situation very difficult. And Andreas Seidel also believes that the global situation warrants formal discussions with the FIA to see what can be done. It is always important to apply common sense. We're absolutely up for a discussion. We have had further discussions with other teams, together with the FIA as well, because we have the same challenge meeting the cap, and now having these additional unexpected expenses, we are open for the discussion and also open for solutions and potential adjustments, as long as everything is happening within reason. According to Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff, higher inflation levels have made it even more difficult for the sport's larger Formula One teams to operate within the sport's cost cap limits. He also admits that the tighter cap will make it difficult for a team that realizes it has applied the wrong concept with the new rules to change course and produce a significantly modified car during the 2022 season. It has been very difficult to structure the company and the organization in the right way to meet the cost cap of $140 million. Also, in a high inflation environment, we are not only reducing by $5 million, but we have a situation where you're not able to really increase the costs and the payroll, so that is extremely painful. And on the other side, you have to decide very carefully where you invest your dollar in R&D. In the past, it was a little bit easier because you could follow various avenues in chasing performance. Today, you have to decide which one has the highest potential and then embark on it. It's a totally different way of operating for the big teams. However, Formula One Managing Director Ross Brawn claims that a solution to the sport's budget cap squeeze caused by inflation is on the way. Brawn acknowledged that the issue must be addressed, and it was one of the topics discussed at the F1 Commission meeting in London. Prior to the meeting, Brawn stated, "I think the inflationary increase needs to be reviewed, because when these rules were developed, inflation was relatively low and predictable, and now it's high and unpredictable. And if you look at the inflation rates that apply to industrial enterprises, like an F1 team, you've got power, you've got raw materials, you got all the things which are proving to be quite expensive at the moment. So I think there's a solution coming on that." McLaren has been a staunch supporter of the cap, but Andreas Seidel admitted that given the rate of inflation, the issue must be addressed. In contrast, Alfa Romeo boss Fred Vasseur stated that any changes to how inflation is dealt with must wait until 2023. You can't change the regulations every single weekend because one team wants to spend more on development, or because they are overweight, or because that they want to have an extra allowance for this, or for this. There is a rule. The most important thing is to stick to the rule. If the concept of inflation and the calculation of the inflation is not the best one, we can think about it for the future. Why not? But we have something in place, and everybody agreed when we signed the deal. Now we have to follow the rules. What are your thoughts on the difficulties teams are facing with the budget cap? And should the FIA make a special exception this season? We'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell button to be notified of future videos.